Hello students, today we are going to do Chapter 1, End of Bipolarity.
The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics emerged from the ashes of the 1917 Socialist Revolution, driven by a vision of socialism and equality, standing firmly against capitalism. After World War II, the Soviet Army liberated Eastern Europe, bringing those nations under its influence. The USSR's economy surged, rivaling only the United States, but this growth came at a price. The system became increasingly bureaucratic and authoritarian, stifling the very freedoms it promised. Life for ordinary citizens grew challenging, as the state prioritized military might in the arms race, matching the US but often at a staggering cost. The paradox of progress and repression defined this era, leaving a complex legacy that still resonates today. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev took the reins of the Soviet Union, aiming to breathe new life into a stagnating system with his policies of perestroika and glasnost. But as he sought reform, he faced fierce backlash. By 1991, a coup led by hardliners revealed the people's yearning for freedom, rejecting the old communist rule. The disintegration of the USSR was not just a political shift, it was a seismic cultural transformation. Internal weaknesses, rampant corruption, and a bloated military drained resources and stifled growth. Gorbachev's reforms were seen as too slow, while nationalism surged, especially in the Baltic republics. Ultimately, in December 1991, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus declared the Soviet Union dissolved, paving the way for capitalism and democracy in the newly independent states. The collapse was a complex tapestry woven from discontent, aspiration, and the relentless quest for sovereignty. The disintegration of the USSR brought profound consequences that reshaped global dynamics. With the end of Cold War confrontations, the ideological battle between socialism and capitalism faded, allowing the United States to emerge as the sole superpower. This shift not only solidified capitalism as the dominant economic system but also paved the way for the birth of numerous new nations, each with its own aspirations and challenges. The end of the Soviet bloc paved way for the emergence of many new countries. All these countries had their own independent aspirations and choices. The international system saw many new players emerge, each with its own identity, interests, and economic and political difficulties. In this landscape, the concept of shock therapy took center stage. Influenced by the World Bank and IMF, this approach aimed to transition post-communist regimes in Russia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe from authoritarian socialism to democratic capitalism. It was a radical overhaul, dismantling Soviet-era structures and breaking existing trade alliances. The result? A tumultuous yet transformative journey towards independence and economic reorientations, where each nation had to navigate its unique identity and path forward. The model of transition in Russia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist system, which was influenced by the World Bank and the IMF, came to be known as shock therapy. This process of transition was due to the collapse of communism. There was a need to make a total shift to a capitalist economy, which meant rooting out completely any structures evolved during the Soviet period. Shock therapy also involved a drastic change in the external orientation of these economies. It also involved a breakup of the existing trade alliances among the countries of the Soviet bloc. Shock therapy devastated economies across the former Soviet region, plunging millions into despair. The ruble's value plummeted, wiping out savings as inflation soared. With the government cutting subsidies, poverty surged, and the middle class found themselves marginalized. Meanwhile, the urgent need for democratic institutions was overshadowed by the rush for economic reform. It wasn't until the early 2000s that some countries, particularly Russia, began to recover, largely thanks to booming exports of oil and natural gas. The construction of democratic institutions was not given the same attention and priority as the demands of economic transformation. Most of these economies, especially Russia, started reviving in 2010 years after their independence. The reason for the revival was the export of natural resources like oil, natural gas and minerals. But the aftermath was fraught with conflict. Chechnya and Dagestan faced violent secessionist movements, while Tajikistan endured a brutal civil war for nearly a decade. Central Asia became a battleground for external powers and oil interests. The breakup of Czechoslovakia into the Czech Republic and Slovakia was relatively peaceful, but Yugoslavia's disintegration was marked by chaos, with regions like Croatia and Bosnia declaring independence amid violence. The legacy of shock therapy and the subsequent turmoil reshaped the region in profound ways. India's relationship with post-communist countries is fascinating, especially with Russia. This partnership is a cornerstone of India's foreign policy, emphasizing a shared vision for a multipolar world. India has benefited significantly from this alliance, think Kashmir, energy supplies, and access to Central Asia. In return, Russia enjoys a lucrative arms market, with India being its second largest customer. The collaboration extends beyond defense. Both nations have joined forces on various scientific projects, showcasing a commitment to innovation and mutual growth. This dynamic relationship not only strengthens their individual positions, but also contributes to global stability.